Hey everybody, and welcome back to another week at Beyond the Trailer Park. And as usual, joining us from the wilds of Pennsylvania, Beth is here. Good evening, Beth.
Good evening, and howdy everybody.
Yeah, it's not gotten too cold over there yet, or are you still sweating? I don't know what Pennsylvania does this time of year.
Well, normally it's cool, but last week's been hot, but it's been very cold at night, so I actually have my heat on.
Oh, wow. We had the air conditioning on for much of last week because summer apparently decided to skip the actual summer months and come now. So,
yeah, that's what it did last week. And then just went, which is fine by me.
On the other side, apparently, Edmonton got snow a week, 2 weeks ago already. So, really glad I don't live in Edmonton because it sucks.
Yeah.
Anyway, and joining me in the studio this week is the lovely Samantha Mondegreen.
Hey. You have the coolest last name.
What's that?
She has the coolest last name.
I think so. Definitely. And since we see her joining us from the you're Ohio again now, aren't you?
I'm Northern Kentucky, but it might as well be Cincinnati.
Okay.
Because I can say Cincinnati, Ohio, but then if I don't say that, then we have to have a conversation like this where I explain, yeah, I live in Northern Kentucky, but I'm literally 30 seconds over the bridge from Cincinnati, so it's basically Cincinnati.
Gotcha. One of those weird ass border situations.
Right.
All right, but it's the fabulous Callie Wright. Good evening.
Hey. Good to be here.
Fresh home from work. She hopefully you didn't speed too much to get here, but
no, and I would have been on time except there was a wreck literally at the intersection where I turned to get to my place, and of course I felt guilty for thinking oh my god, this is gonna make me late. Then I got up and realized that no one was hurt. Like the people who had wrecked were even joking around with each other. Like no one's hurt, so I'm allowed to be annoyed by this without being a jerk. So I'm
exactly good. There you go. Fender benders are okay to be annoyed about.
Right.
And from over in Minnesota, we have the fabulous Rissy McCool.
I resent the fact that Callie did not say I have the coolest last name. I at least have the McCoolest.
Coolest. You know what? She is kind of right. She is kind of right.
Mondegreen just rolls off the tongue. It's just, I don't know. I mean, your name is cool. I mean, it has cool in it. Like I'm in it.
I have to say though, I worked with someone years ago whose last name was Doom. That wins. Yeah,
that wins. And
we told them that they should get a doctorate in something at some point.
Oh God, yes. And I just have the most boring last name in the world, and the one pre-transition. When everyone thought I was a dude. Everyone's favorite joke was, "Oh, I found Mr. Right." Ha!
Oh, I
realized I die.
That never even occurred to me.
Yeah, I die a little on the inside every time. Thanks, you're super funny and original. Of course, I don't have to worry about that anymore.
You're probably that was really funny the first 30,000 times I heard it.
Right. Well, and every once in a while, still oh, somebody found Mrs. Right. It still happens. It's just not every time. So. Yeah, still sad because of that. It's fine. I'm not better.
People think is original over and over again.
Yeah.
Favorite thing in the world.
Oh, goodness. Speaking of favorite thing in the world, I have not seen it yet, but you have good things to say about the new Star Trek, right?
I really do. And so what's funny is we also haven't talked a lot since my surgery. And when you said I haven't seen it yet, I thought you were going to mention that you hadn't seen my vagina yet. And I'm like, yeah, many people have, so that's fine.
Well, I haven't, but it wasn't on my list of things I was aspiring to see,
Photos will be passed around after the show. It's okay.
I haven't seen it either, and Callie and I are a thing, so I'm actually kind of offended.
I mean, here's the thing. It's not really much to look at this point. I'll just
Why don't you let me decide that?
Do you need piercings and tattoos? What's next?
Just less scarring and drainage if we're gonna go there.
Yeah, that's fair. It hasn't been that long, has it?
No, but 2 months.
Oh,
2 months, yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like a while, but that's pretty major surgery, so that takes a while to I mean, I would imagine it would be quite a while before everything is sort of done healing.
Well, you're not supposed to even attempt sex for 3 months. So,
Yeah.
and I'm not allowed to swim for 3 months. Like 3 months is the big like milestone. That's when I'm allowed to try to ride a bike again, which like I don't ride bikes, so that's not a thing anyways.
Right.
But yeah, Star Trek, right?
Yes. Well, we could talk about vaginas, but
I effing loved the first 2 episodes of Star Trek.
You can say
Discovery.
fuck here, by the way.
Oh, I say effing because it's fun, but
okay, that's cool. That's cool.
The third one is actually up as of last night, and that's
what network is it on? I was meaning to ask you because I don't have cable, so I have to look for.
For you assholes outside the United States, it's just on Netflix. For us, we have to pay for CBS's standalone streaming service to get it.
Okay, it's on Netflix. Yay!
Yeah.
As I have a proxy, so I can pretend to be American if I need to.
Oh, you know what? I should probably set up a proxy so I can do the same thing.
You should.
I might just set up. Just buy this.
Well,
like
you can use it. You can pretend to be British or something too if you want. That works.
Yeah, but I'm really excited. After this is done, I'm gonna go watch the 3rd episode, which I've heard nothing but good things about. So
okay, yeah. Guess what I may have to do tonight. We're done.
Gee, I wonder.
Well, and so I kind of need a bit of an uplift anyway. I haven't talked about this very much, just for many reasons. But I did go to Milwaukee this past weekend. You may have noticed I posted absolutely nothing about it.
How long did you spend in the shower when you came home?
I had a I didn't get home till 2 a.m. this morning. So I spent a nice long soak in the tub this afternoon. Yeah. So I'm actually probably going to show up. I'll post about it later, but I'm talking about going on another podcast to talk about it. So I'm not going to really devote much time to it here because I'd rather talk about these fine ladies and their initiative at what they're up to. But needless to say, giant clusterfuck. There were great people there that I love and was very happy to be able to spend some time with and some quality time with. And then, there was other stuff that was pretty awful. So that's about all I'm going to really get in. Also, I did appear on Brainstorm podcast, but it was on Friday night, so it was before the conference. So I just talked a little bit about sort of what I was expecting and whatnot. So yeah, it was worse than what I expected. So there's that. But anyway, yes, I've scrubbed, and actually the entry stamp is pretty much gone off my hand now, so I don't have to look at that shit anymore. So, yay! But there's that. But other than that, I talked about my Newfoundland trip last week, so I don't have to talk about that. So, ladies, you have, and I want to say, I believe, Rissy, was this your brainchild or was this a collaboration? It's the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative.
It was kind of a collaborative effort between Callie and I. I forget what it was we were coming off of. It was something where we were working together. And I just made a small David Smalley joke. And I said, we should start our own media network with blackjack and hookers. And... it hit me a few minutes after that. It's like, wait, why don't we do that? Like, a lot of people who don't really know anything would say, oh, but there's so many of you already. We've heard enough gay stuff. We've heard enough trans stuff. It's just dominating everything. And it's like, I can name more people who are on cognitive dissonance and Puzzle in a Thunderstorm than I can name trans podcasters. It's
exactly
not that different. Yeah. So we were sitting there talking about, and Callie, that she didn't really want to start anything unless it was to help other trans podcasters or trans people. And I think we were pretty much in the same line of that when we were talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And what we ended up coming up with through series of document exchanges and talks and Skype calls is this idea that we have a platform, and that's pretty rare for trans people. We're not using that platform to give other voices in the community their own form that may not heard. Especially, it's hard enough to get a podcast started.
You're getting garbly, Rissy. You're garbly a bit.
I have no idea why.
Garbage.
I don't know. It's you were just chopping in and out a bit. Sorry. But back up a little bit. So you're saying that you wanted to help with other podcasters and giving them visibility.
Well, not even necessarily podcasters yet, but just, voices don't have the access. Maybe. And kind of what we came with was not only this media network of allied trans podcasters, but a network that we could bring into so that they already have security of being associated with podcasters, which is so difficult, especially as a trans person in this country, in this movement.
Yeah. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's so easy to start a podcast, blah, blah. And in some ways it is. But there's a shit ton of work involved in it that people don't really realize it. And I think that's maybe a bit of a misconception that people have that, you can just record something and slap it online and voila, you have a podcast. And it's not quite that easy. Well, it can be, but if you want a quality product, then it's not that easy.
Well, just to give you an idea.
What's that, Beth?
I was going to say, like, my 15-minute blurbs that I do occasionally on my YouTube channel, it's 4 hours of editing. Imagine, and like Callie, I know it's going to sound kind of odd, but you're a perfectionist with your sound, with your quality for Atheist Manifesto. So I can imagine what you all go through to put out the sound quality that you do, besides researching the content.
Well, yeah, and so when Riss initially and it wasn't the first time somebody had sort of broached the idea of like, hey, we should do like some kind of network thing, and I'm like, well, we already are friends with everyone, we already all help each other, so like if we're gonna formalize a thing and give it a name and make it a thing, there's got to be more to it than that. There's got to be something that we get from it or something that we give from it. And I had sort of hatched the idea a while ago of like, once my show gets to a certain level, I would love to do something to help other people get started doing content creation in one form or another, whether that's a YouTube channel, podcast, or even a blog or something like that, just to kind of point people in the direction of like, hey, you've got stuff to say, and maybe I can do something to help you say it. If you need $50 to buy a webcam because you don't have $50 for a webcam, just something like that. And I never really given it a lot more thought than just that's something I want to do one day. And then and when Riss approached me about that, I was like, well, yeah, like I've been kind of thinking about this thing, and maybe it's time. And so that was kind of the genesis of the whole thing. It's like Riss said, it's rare that trans folks get the kinds of platforms that we have. I mean, neither of us are rock stars with millions of listeners or anything like that, but like we do have platforms. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to pay that forward, and it's something that I try to do anyways. But I think it makes sense to sort of formalize that and actually make it like we're making a concerted effort to bring more people into the fold and to help people, because we've both been doing this for some time. We may not be the best ever at it, but we're both fairly good at it, I think. And we can be in a position to help people figure stuff out, because it can be really intimidating. I mean,
absolutely.
In the grand scheme of things, there's nothing that's incredibly difficult about podcasting, but there's a lot to learn.
Yes.
And so even just being able to have, well, I've got this YouTube tutorial that you can look at. I've got this thing that I know has good stuff. So you don't have to search around through the bullshit to find the good stuff. So yeah, that was kind of the genesis of the whole thing. And it was, that kind of thing was something I'd been kind of turning over in my head for a while. So it was kind of a, what do they call it? Convergent evolution, where like two people have the same idea at the same time, and then like it just kind of comes together. So yeah.
Excellent. It was preordained by no.
Right.
I feel like it's also important to add that, there's of course the equality myth, and that is that we all have access to the same material, the same economic prosperity, the same jobs, the same housing, the same healthcare. And at least in our country right now, the president can discriminate against us more than they already can. Yeah. So, trans people can be discriminated against when it comes to housing. Employment.
Frozen.
There aren't any.
Yeah, Riss, you're freezing up again. Yeah,
I know what's going on. I'm on.
I think your bandwidth is going wonky on you. Yep, she's frozen.
Oh, why? I don't have anything else open.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it's Google just being stupid too.
Yay, Google Hangouts.
There you Google.
Go. Yeah, blame it on the Googles.
Well, I think Riss hit on a good point. She talked about access to...
Yes.
And people have heard me rail about this concerning the ACA and its repeal. The LGBTQI community, yes, we have access to a lot of shit, but that don't mean we can afford it. That doesn't mean that we have the ability to gain that. I mean, and for something as podcasting, you would be surprised at some of the snafus that go along with it for somebody from an outside group, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Access doesn't mean jack shit in this country.
Yeah, well, and that's that's the difference between equality and justice, right? Equality is everyone having the same rights. Justice is everyone having the same access. And it reminds me a lot of a conversation that I had. I went to this dinner it was basically a bunch of executives from a bunch of the big companies that are based in Cincinnati, and they do this like leadership training thing where they basically pick like a token diverse person to have dinner with, which is like, it's like, on one hand, it's like it's a good thing, but it makes me a little uncomfortable being like the token trans in the room. And it turned out to be great. I'll look, spoiler alert, it turned out to be great. And what got me thinking is they kept asking me about my experiences, and I kind of had to stop and be like, well, I'm not necessarily speaking just for myself here, because I mean, the fact that I'm able to be here means that I'm at a relative level of privilege. I had a car to drive here. You know what I mean? Yes. I had the night off work, that kind of stuff. I'm not the person who has to go down and apply for welfare benefits when I don't look like the picture on my ID because I can't afford to get that changed. And, I'm not the one who has to ride public transportation and be in front of a whole bunch of people who may not like who I am, and people like Riss and I mean, we're trans, and obviously that is a large disadvantage in a lot of ways, but we're both also pretty privileged in a lot of ways too. And the voices that you hear are largely voices like ours. And so if we can take some of those people who actually do have those experiences and lift them up and amplify them, because they're the ones, I think it's probably safe to say that they're the voices who are probably the most important to be heard from, but they're the least likely to be heard from, because it's really easy for me to tell somebody, they're like, well, hey, I want to start a podcast. What do I need? And I'm like, oh, do you have a laptop? Yeah, I've got a laptop. Well, you just need like $50 for a USB microphone. That's easy for me to say, because $50 for a USB microphone is easily in my budget. You know what I mean? But it's not for somebody else. So, absolutely. I mean, the idea is to find people and say, like, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to contribute? And if it's something that we think is worthwhile, then, you know, let's see what we can do to maybe spot you $50 for a microphone, or, you know, or $50 for a YouTube cam or something like that, you know?
Or even, you know, things like, and a lot of people who maybe just listen to podcasts don't realize there's other costs like paying for hosting. Like, we use Spreaker. You can use it for free, but that platform is very limited. You can't store many of your episodes, so you would look at having to only have so many of the most recent ones. You wouldn't be able to keep a library, and you could only broadcast live for 30 minutes and things like that, which, hey, it's better than nothing, absolutely. But it's not, you know, it's the free part isn't necessarily going to get the exposure for people that they deserve or want. So yeah, and it's not hugely expensive, but if you are on a very limited budget, it doesn't matter if it's $10 or $1 million. If you don't have it, you don't have it.
Well, speaking as a very poor person, that can be one of the biggest detriments to podcasting. And it was really what kind of shut me down, even though I was doing the whole different as content. But that's what stopped me. I didn't have the money. I still don't have the money. I mean, my webcam and my microphone, my headset, is a gift from a listener who happens to be a friend, you know, sent to me. Got sick, and you know, if it wasn't for the community as a whole lifting me up, I don't think I'd be on right now, because I'd be homeless. So yeah, cost is a big downfall, and I think any way that, as you know, you guys' platform develops, and us as a community, as a general, as podcasters, anything we can do to help is the best thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, on the show I do with Ari, the Sister Getting Out of Hand, for a couple of weeks, we had a couple of trans people who either were homeless or who had been homeless recently. And nope, you know, it's not like they have podcasting studios at homeless shelters.
No.
And it's not like, even if they did, that the trans people at the shelter would be the first in line to use them. Because, you know, Callie was talking about the relative privilege that we have as trans people, but, you know, when we look at the culture of being homeless in major cities, even in a place like Seattle, like, they have to fight just to survive. And that is something that Callie and I probably will hopefully never have to understand, let alone be able to speak the experience of. So when we have someone on like that, you know, it really gives some more perspective that even we cannot truly empathize with. And that those are the kind of voices we want to make sure have the chance to get heard beyond one Skype call.
Well, that's like what Callie was saying. Those are the voices, arguably, that need to be heard the most, because people may not understand that it's extra hard. Like, the more, you know, how many out groups do you belong to before, you know, you've got the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, and the challenges are so different for so many people. So I think it's a great way of looking at it, that let's look at the people that do need to be uplifted the most. So yeah, absolutely.
And that's particularly why we started the Sister Getting Out of Hand, is to have a trans exclusive show, because it was funny to us after we just pitched the idea, how many cis people freaked the fuck out. Oh my God. And it was like, well, what if we started a show called The Trans Are Getting Out of Hand? And it's like, yeah, how many laws are being passed to keep you out of the bathroom? Let's talk about that. So yeah, so
well,
sorry.
It's okay. I constantly joke with Ari that cis people have happy hour. I have the Sister Getting Out of Hand, because it's the 1 hour a week where I can just not have to worry about anything else and have a good time.
Absolutely. And as a cis person, I have no idea why people are getting freaked out about it. Like,
because they are so out of hand.
Apparently. But it's like, okay. And I've heard this many, many times, and I agree. It's like when you look at media and visibility and role models, it's all cis. Like, what the fuck else do we need? You know?
Well, look at what Ellen DeGeneres went through when she came out on Ellen.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the stink that was raised. Or when Sandra Bernhardt on Rosie O'Donnell's show. I mean.
Right.
Yeah, and actually, there's a fun story about that. It's a story I've told in talks before, but probably worth repeating. Speaking of Ellen DeGeneres coming out, my first inkling of what society thought about LGBT people came from her coming out. It happened when I was still going to church with my grandma. I think I was maybe 11 or 12, somewhere in that neighborhood. I was a really young kid, and I remember when it happened. I remember her preacher talking about it from the pulpit and just talking about how evil and immoral and all this it was. And he was talking about all of these companies that had pulled advertising from her show in response. And one of them was Wendy's, the fast food chain. And so my grandma went out of her way specifically to take us to Wendy's for lunch that day to celebrate Wendy's stand on morality. And she even told the like 16, 17-year-old kid working the cash register, that's why we were there, because they pulled their advertising from Ellen and we want to support their strong stand on morality.
Oh no.
So yeah, that was my
just to give you a little side note to that, Dave Thomas, who I had met because I worked for Wendy's for almost 12 years, is one of the biggest bigots on the face of the planet. He would be compared to Cathay from Chick-fil-A. Yeah, he wasn't the man that people make him out to be, but yeah, I mean, I have people here in town, and I live in a fairly small town, 3,000 people in the county, 2,000 in town, and we have quite a few young trans men. I don't know if they are using the male pronouns or not. They're like 40 years younger than me. But the ridicule that they take from people is just, it's crazy. I mean, I live in a base station of republicanism, so that's part of the problem. But it got so bad that one of the girls I worked with, he's male to female, and just the ridicule he put up with, it finally thing in my mind, because he's out of this fucking town. You know, she literally got ran out of town. I mean, best thing for her in the long run, but just it's atrocious. What I mean, being a gay, being a lesbian, being gay, to what some of my trans friends have gone through.
It still boggles my mind that people act that way. I just sometimes I think I came from the wrong.
And one of the phrases you always hear is oppress. It's like, just because we're dealing with something doesn't mean we're trying to make it up. That phrase is usually said by maybe everyone doesn't have the same
Riss, we're losing you pretty bad again, though.
Yeah, we're losing you again.
Damn you, internet!
Yeah. Do you want to give it a try again, Russ? You froze right up. I know. It sucks.
Where did I freeze up?
Pretty much the whole thing you just said.
I said was, sometimes when we tell stories like this, we'll hear the phrase oppression.
Yeah.
And someone will be rolling their eyes.
Right.
So I'm worried.
We're losing you again.
I think I kind of get what she said. She's talking about people who, when a trans person or another minority talks about being oppressed and people roll their eyes and like, oh yeah, right, oppressed. Blah, blah, blah.
I think oppression Olympics is what she was talking about.
Yeah.
So I just get sick of hearing that, and turning the idea that the only true oppression happens to white cis men has kind of taken hold. If you look at the place you were at this weekend, Deborah.
Oh hell yes. Yeah, I
Or if
kind
you
of
look at the
heard
White
that.
House, I mean,
I kind of heard that far more than I ever thought I would hear that in one place. So yeah, yeah, he was right. Yeah.
That's
Put it this way.
I just had a light bulb go off in my head.
In the middle of what many of us came to call the shitstorm, I actually got a phone call from my credit card company because I forgot to tell them that I was traveling to Milwaukee. So they were like, what the fuck is all this kind of thing? So I actually went out, and after I took care of the phone call, I was like, don't think I'm going back in there. Yeah. So you're right. That was an excellent example of how that narrative is really getting out of hand. Yeah, I totally agree.
And I remember when my roommate, who well-intended, but again, cishet white guy, had the nerve to say to me that, well, sometimes I just feel like it's a crime to be a straight white man anymore. And I had to go, no. Just because you say problematic things and people call you on it is not the same thing as a crime. And just because you have to deal with people telling you not to say things is not the same thing as actually being oppressed.
If you were oppressed, you would have been loaded up into a van and carted off to jail for saying those things, instead of, hey, maybe that wasn't the most sensitive thing or appropriate thing you could have said.
Or thrown off a building.
Or thrown off a building, yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a cliche at this point.
Executed.
Yeah, it's kind of a cliche at this point, but I mean it comes back to the phrase, what is it, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression, or something like that.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's, I mean, we've all heard it a million times, but like there's a reason for that, because that's kind of how it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, like, I don't know, maybe I came from a different universe, but I've never felt threatened by the fact of somebody else getting, being treated better, getting more opportunity, becoming closer to being equal. Like, I don't understand that mentality at all. I never have.
Well, it's also a fact that...
Sorry, Russ.
Go ahead, Russ.
It's also a fact that a lot of white men don't fear equality. They fear that they're going to be treated the way white men have treated everybody else. Mm-hmm. And that's very telling.
Fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point, too. For sure.
Well, I think going to the whole privilege thing is that, and this is an argument I get into a lot with people concerning, being a lesbian, is that even though it's not an issue for me at the job I am currently at, because, my bosses know they don't give a two flying fucks whether I'm gay or not, to walk into my job tomorrow and there's not a damn fucking thing I could do about it. Walk into my bank and have my bank say, sorry, we don't want you as a customer because you're lesbian. I can go to the grocery store and be banned from the only grocery store in my town because I am gay. Now, for transgendered individuals, I'm going to say it's probably a lot worse. At least here where I live, I know the ridicule they put up with. That's not privilege, being able to go shopping. To go shopping regardless of who I fuck and who I love.
That's
right. That's, and I think, us don't understand that. They just don't get it. Some do, but very few.
That brings up a good point, is what is actually a privilege, and what is, you know, like you said, going to the grocery store should not be a privilege.
It does.
Being able to afford healthcare.
Yes, being able to afford healthcare. Like, holy shit. You know,
people have heard me argue about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Usually people who have healthcare who are arguing about it.
Yeah.
It's funny that.
Yeah, actually, I shared a story for from the Atheists Manifesto Facebook page. There was this guy who was known as like the sassy gay Republican, who was you know, arguing against socialized healthcare so hard, and then he got into a car crash, didn't have medical care, and I was just like, and now your moment of zen.
I remember reading about that, and I was like, if I believed in karma, I would say it was a bitch right now.
Right, exactly. Like, that's one of those times where I want to believe it. Like, I wish it was a thing.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what the arguments came down to for me. I mean, like, when, you know, and I've told this before, I got into an argument, this was after my strokes, with a gentleman in my doctor's office waiting room, who basically point blank, nitty gritty of the conversation came down to that I should just go fuck off and die because I don't deserve health care. And the other gentleman there happens to be a friend / acquaintance. And he just kind of looked at the other dude like, you just basically told her to go die. And it may, you know, hopefully it made him think. I don't know. I haven't talked to him since. But it's like, people don't realize, I mean, is something as basic as healthcare. I mean, depending on what state you live in, if you have, you know, the protections of the law, like in Colorado, against discrimination, I don't have those protections. Hell, I live in a right-to-work state. Fire me for whatever fucking reason they care. There's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
And people don't understand living under that onus. Burden. I mean, I'm trying to stockpile medication daily that I'm not supposed to skip a dose because of the iffiness of the ACA right now. I shouldn't have to do that for anything, let alone for healthcare. But as I said, I think it's 10 times worse for those that are trans.
It can be, and you know, and that's the thing
Crazy.
that I forget who I was talking to, but they were asking about you know, the state of trans health. Oh, I was talking to a college class. I was invited to college campus, and they were asking about, you know, the state of healthcare, and I was like, well, you know, there's been progress, and if you're lucky enough to have good insurance and money, then, you know, the experience can be pretty okay. You know, I personally have had almost universally great healthcare experiences, but I also have good insurance, and I have a good job, and I don't have a lot of disposable income, but I can absorb if, you know, I have to incur an extra $100 for my health 1 month. That's not going to break me. You know what I mean? So like, I'm really lucky, but like, what kind of commentary is it that is like the only reason that I have those things is because I'm lucky? That's not something I went in being able to expect. And that's not something that a lot of people can go in looking to expect. And people still have bad experiences, even if you have good insurance and money. Some people still have bad experiences just because the policies aren't in place, you know. Something as simple as, you know, if a doctor doesn't think about the fact that they might be treating a trans client at some point, they're going to just say like, well, this person's legal name is, I'm sure, the name I'm supposed to call them. And you know, they walk in, and of course the person filling out the paperwork has to fill out the paperwork with their legal name because that's what their insurance is under, that's what their ID is on. Then, you know, they walk out and they call John Smith back to the waiting room, and John Smith has long hair, looks very feminine, wearing a dress. Like, that can create an unsafe situation, right? So, you know, so my doctors actually have a spot for legal name, preferred name. How difficult is that? But that's not something that you have everywhere, and that's something that a lot of people are resistant to. And even in good situations, oftentimes, doctors who are 100% on board, they just don't know anything about treating trans patients. Like, I think the statistic in the last trans survey was like 25% of trans people felt that they had to educate their doctors on how to treat them.
Wow.
And that's like, that shouldn't be the way that works. Like, you get paid a lot of money to be the person who knows this stuff better than me.
Yeah. And that's
we actually know.
Go ahead, Beth.
We all know somebody who just went through a very similar situation in the ER.
Yes.
Their dead name. And as another point Callie made is that one of my trans friends, very young, 19, 20 years old, where I live in the Pennsylvania, you either go to Pittsburgh or you go to Philly. Riss was able to give me, because she had gone to school in Philly, of a name of a doctor organization. Now I can't remember. I'd have to look it up again. Give it as a referral. I mean, there's nothing. Yeah. Even in the quote bigger city that's close to me, Du Bois, I mean, it like 25% don't know how to deal with it.
And that's something that, as a cis person, you would never even, you go to the doctor and you're being focused on what the issue is you're going to the doctor for. You don't have to think about, are they going to treat me with the respect that I deserve and understand my overall needs as well as what it is I'm going to ask about. It's just something we don't have to deal with. And if you're already dealing with a medical issue that you want to see a doctor about, I can imagine how much more stress and potential aggravation to whatever medical issue it is that can add to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I had to go to the ER after I'd come out. I was hanging out with Celeste one night. She was getting ready to leave. I went to go to the bathroom and I urinated blood.
Oh, yes.
And that was 40% of how scared I was. 60% of how scared I was how I was going to be treated at the hospital, because I had just read the story about this trans guy who had breast cancer and didn't figure it out until it was too late because the doctor didn't call him. So like I had been reading these stories and I'm like, I'm going to go here, and what if there's something seriously wrong with me and, they don't want to do anything, or they, screw up. They don't do they don't do their whole thing. And thankfully, again, luckily that didn't turn out to be the case. Everyone was very respectful, and I had to have some awkward conversations because, you go to the ER, you've got F marked on everything. They ask you when your last period was. They ask you if you've had a pregnancy test recently. And I'm like, yeah, those are things for me.
Yeah.
And, but, when it happened, the doctor was like, do you any vaginal discharge? And I was like, I'm trans. I have a penis. And he said, okay. And it was just like, that was the entirety of the conversation. And then, they took me back for a CT scan, and the guy was like, did we do a pregnancy test? And I was like, I'm trans. That's not a thing that you need to worry about. And he said, okay. And it was just like, each time it was like, oh my God, I'm so tense. And then, okay. But it heaped a lot more stress.
Well, exactly. And and we all know how stress can affect the body. And like, let's say it was an issue like Beth's where she was having a stroke, and you go in there and you're incredibly stressed out because of those additional issues. I mean, that could aggravate that condition so much worse.
Yeah, well, and thankfully what I was there for was entirely physical, so I still had the presence of mind to be able to advocate for myself, but
yes.
What if I was, passing in and out of consciousness and all of that kind of stuff? Like, what is that about? Because where I live is not a bastion of progressiveness necessarily.
Right.
It's kind of a mixed bag in Cincinnati. You kind of never know what you're gonna get. So it's just, it's a crapshoot. And like I said, I've had good experiences, thankfully, but I understand that makes me lucky. That doesn't mean that,
Yes.
And like I always hesitate, and I always kind of have to add caveats to that. And I'm like, because everyone's like, oh, it's not really as bad as people make it out to be, and then they hear about my experiences and they take that as
Yes.
confirmation, like, oh, it's not really as
Yes.
bad as everyone says it. Because look, I mean, look at her; she's had nothing but great
Yeah.
experiences, and I'm like, no, I'm lucky. I'm extremely lucky that I haven't had those horrible experiences, and I'm sure I will have. I mean, I've been out and transitioning for 4 years. Like in the grand scheme of things, that's not a long time. Like I've got a long time for bad things to happen to me, and I'm sure they will.
So I've actually got a story that might be relevant to this. I was reading this book. It's called We Believe You, and it's a compilation of stories of campus assault survivors. And the caveat of this story was the fact that when I got done reading it and went back, I realized not only was it someone I knew, but it was someone that I went to school with who ended up transferring from the same community college in the same city that I went to, Philadelphia. They went to Temple. And this happened while I was in college in Philadelphia. And I'm not going to read the whole story, but I just want to feel like either one of us can really communicate what it's like. This is a trans woman talking about dealing with medical people after, unfortunately, being raped. And she says, when I went to check him out of the residence hall, the security guards noticed that I was drunk. I didn't want them to know. I really didn't want to go to the hospital or deal with any of them at all. But as protocol dictates, they called the police, more guards, and the EMTs. The responders were 3 EMTs and 2 cops, and they all looked at me and could tell I was drunk. But I didn't care, but didn't care that I had my rapist semen all over me. In hindsight, it seems really wrong to me that they were so nonchalant with my rapist, could tell I was drunk, and could tell something had gone on between me and him, but either didn't put it together or didn't care to. They were too busy chatting and laughing it up with my rapist to notice. They let him go, and he ran out of the building like it was on fire. Deep down, I knew reporting my rape could backfire, but I didn't have a choice. As part of an administration's inquiry about my drinking that night, I was asking what had gone on with my guest. I was already facing sanctions for drinking. I was explicitly told that not reporting what happened would earn more disciplinary action, so I was forced into it. The school's administration told me that they felt uncomfortable dealing with a transgender survivor, particularly a trans woman. Administration's behavior didn't make sense. It helped both members, but not me. But now I understand that they bought into the idea that trans women are unrapeable. In their eyes, the lack of consent didn't matter. That is what trans people have to deal with. And this wasn't 1970. This was 2014.
But that is actually an issue that crops up from time to time, is this idea that if someone has a penis, you can't rape them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's ridiculous.
And there's also the idea that that trans women are inherently disgusting, and that's that plays a lot into it as well. Like oh, of course you're gross. Who would do that to you? There's no way that would actually happen to you. When in fact, we are the objects of really, really gross fetishization, if that's a word, gross fetishizing for some people. So yeah.
And it's also fair to mention, Callie and I's mutual friend Danielle.
I was thinking of her when you guys were talking about that. I was totally thinking of her. And you're froze up again, Riss.
Not to be.
We lost you at Danielle.
I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm, so it might just cut out.
Okay, fair enough. But you were gonna talk about Danielle Moscato, right?
Yeah, I was talking about who had the post a picture of herself. This person responded by saying, not to be dramatic, but if I saw this person, I would kill them.
Yeah, not to be dramatic, right? Okay.
Someone for existing isn't dramatic. What the fuck is?
Exactly. And not just for existing, and the fact that you just don't like how they look.
Well, I think what drove that posting home for me was a couple months prior, Danielle had posted that, concerning how transitioning has not really been easy for her because, you know, she does, I don't know how to say this tactfully, so you guys can slaughter me for this, but she doesn't present well as a woman as of yet. And for her to take that step to dress in a way that makes her happy, and then they have some fucktard.
Yes.
You know, it just blew my mind. I was like,
well, and when you were talking about access and financial constraints and things, Danielle came to mind because she's posted about how she has been unable to pursue transition effectively due to some financial issues, and how devastating that's been for her, and it's contributed to depression and things like that. And I'm just, you know, my heart breaks to hear that, because why the hell should she have to suffer in that way just because of money? Well, it's not just, I know there are other things involved, but a large portion of the issue for her was money. And that's just unconscionable to me.
Yeah, but you know, that's the world we live in. Hurry capitalism.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what makes your project so important. And it kind of, Callie, I think it was you that had said about, you know, a driving point was to get the stories, people that don't have the platform that we do, get those stories out there. I mean, I think that's what makes it, you know, it's important. We got to hear these little people's stories, even littler than we are.
Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, I mean, when we do trans activism, I mean, I'll speak for myself, and I think I'm pretty safe in saying this on Riss's behalf as well, is most of the activism that we do is not necessarily for us, because you know, day to day, I don't really feel the sting, aside from the general sort of discomfort of living in a world that's pretty hostile to me. Like, I don't really face a lot of direct bad things day to day. You know, I mean, I get some hate on the internet, whatever, that I'm able to shrug that off pretty easily. But like, you know, I don't face it at work. I don't face it at home. I don't face it from my family. I'm fortunate enough to have a very large group of friends that love me and support me. So, you know, the day-to-day stuff, when I'm talking about all of the awful things that trans people go through, you know, 99% of that stuff doesn't really happen to me. You know, I have my own struggles, to be sure. You know, my life is not perfect, but my life is rather charmed in a lot of ways. And so that, again, that sort of comes back to why we do what we do, because you know, we have this position, this platform, and an audience. So it's like, if we're really about the things that we say we're about, you know, why wouldn't we do something like this? That's the way that I see it.
Well, and it's I've heard this said before, and it's something that I believe in too, is the idea of, if you've got a measure of privilege, let's use that for people who don't.
Yep. I've used the term weaponize your privilege before.
Yes. And like, that's something where I've talked with a lot of my ex-Muslim friends, and a particular a friend of mine who escaped from Bangladesh. And even in the United States, she's very blunt, shall we say, and she's learning, because she's only been in America for a year, and she's learning just how sensitive the average American is about certain things, and how she's finding, for instance, she thought she could come to America and say whatever she wants and people would be okay with that. And
because free speech.
Yes, that's what everybody outside of America hears is, you know, free speech. And she's learning kind of that that's not the case, and especially because she's brown and she's an immigrant, and she's experienced people who haven't been as I guess flexible with her as I think they would have been to a white American person. And so that's something we've had discussions about where, you know, I'll mention, you know, I wore a shirt that said, warning scathing atheist out in public. And she's like, holy crap, you wore that. And I'm like, yeah, because unfortunately or fortunately, I can get away with it. People aren't going to bug me about it because I'm a white chick.
Well, my power's flickering, so I feel like I should get in one more thing before I get cut out here, because it's probably going to happen. And that is to just give you an idea of the difference in the way that people are treated. Callie can back this up. There was someone at ReasonCon who threw a fit that having to remember people's pronouns was like fascism. And when we started the page, this person messaged the page and was like, so what do you want to chat about? I was like, what? I was like, well, you added me, so let's talk. What do you want to talk about? It's like, it's not a fucking dating service, Chad. And it's just like, that's the level that we deal with. It's like, it's trying to bring visibility to something that exists. And
Chad, it's always Chad.
And someone who gets a response is, oh, they invited me to support their charity. It must be about me.
Yeah, and this was. I mean, he posted this this thing about how it makes conversation more difficult if you're corrected on people's pronouns. It wasn't even that he was being expected to remember them. It was that being corrected on someone's pronouns just derails the conversation and makes it so difficult. And I'm like, well, gosh, isn't it terrible for you that's a thing you have to deal with? Like, that's so awful for you. Like, you know, and here I was, the first ReasonCon that I went to, I was wondering if I was going to leave there alive. You know, because I didn't fucking know how people were going to receive me, especially not even people, you know, at the con, because I felt pretty all right about people at the con, but like, you know, some asshole in a gas station bathroom and that kind of stuff. So it's like, I've got so much sympathy for your conversational difficulties, you fuck. Like,
well, before we went on air, because Ari was going to be joining us, I'm Deb. I said, what's Ari's pronouns? She told me, and I was like, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, and I'll be bluntly honest with this, but it's my problem, not Ari's. I have to readjust my thinking. Yeah, I'm part of the community. I have been since I was 5. Learning at 53.
Yep.
You know, it's like, it's not about me. Exactly. About you guys. I mean, it's the pronoun conversations that I've seen on both your pages, your personal pages. I'm like, seriously?
It's fucking obnoxious. It's like it's seriously, it's like the English language is a religion. Like, I hate to be that person.
That's a good point.
I hate to be that person that's just like, everything I don't like is like religion. But I mean, seriously, people act like the English language is something that's, you know, handed down from on high and static and unchanging, and like when you challenge any of its perceived conventions, that you're committing fucking heresy. And I mean, that's literally what people act like. And these are the same people who will say something like, "Oh, that's hella awesome." Like, okay, like you can use a word that literally was made up like fucking 2 years ago, but you can't use a singular gender neutral pronoun for somebody without a fight, without whining about it. Like
or they really say things like that's sick, meaning it's really cool, or, you know, PHAT or whatever other silly things have come across in the last few years.
It comes down to trying to sound cooler than you are. That's
yeah.
But all the young kids are saying these days.
Yeah, and I've said that to people. I was like, if this is the line of reasoning you're gonna go down, I am gonna follow you, and every time I hear you use any colloquialisms, I'm going to scream in your face.
Well, it's like many years ago, I was did a presentation on English only when I was in 3rd attempt at college, and the topic of eugenics, sorry, and I went to a primarily inner city college, so there were a lot of African Americans that attended school there, and Hispanics, and like they would get on me about language uses, and like, you're using a word y'all made up, like it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, yeah, it's going to be hard for me to adjust to it, but I'm going to adjust. I'm not going to make you change you to please me or to suit me or to make it easier for me.
I'm going to cut out after I say this just because I know it's going to happen anyway. But the last thing I'm going to say is most people like to think that they're allies or that they're for equality as long as it doesn't change or inconvenience them in any way. And if your position is that I agree with everybody's rights unless I have to change anything I think, anything I feel, or listen to another person, you're not an ally and you really just want a pat on the back for being a good person. So
that's, yep.
So,
well, thanks for joining us.
Can someone tell Donald Trump that?
Yeah.
So,
do you want to take a second and plug your shows and stuff quick before you leave?
Sure. I am the host of the Inciting Incident podcast with Bethany Futrell. And we got a great talk coming up with Alex Jules about stuff that totally didn't happen at Mythicist Milwaukee. And I'm host of The Sister Getting Out of Hand with Ari Stillman. And I'm co-host of Doubting Dogma with Molly Young Mormon. I'm co-host of FTM for Trans Men with my husband, Aiden McCool. And I release my audiobooks on a little podcast called Storytime with Rissy. If you're looking for any of my books, you can find them at rissmccool.com or on Amazon under Marissa Alexa McCool. So thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Sorry about the weather.
Thank you. That's okay. You can't control that either.
Oh, I beg to differ. If you heard the commentary,
I know
from
you
politicians in the
trans
United
people
States.
and lesbians are killing the weather and causing hurricanes.
Yeah.
You have so many superpowers. It's amazing.
Oh fuck. Oh shit. But yeah, it's.
Oh, Kelly, I think you're catching up to me on the powers you hold.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Some
I've got
of the crappy shit I've read the last 2 days. Holy fuck.
Oh.
yep, earthquakes, tornadoes,
Yeah.
hurricanes. Yep.
Wait,
that was my domain for years.
Yeah, I'm waiting for them to add volcanoes to the list.
I saw that on the list today.
Okay.
Sorry.
We haven't had any of those for a while though, so I guess that they're just figuring.
Well,
you can do that
there's
anyway.
one in Vanuatu, I think.
Okay. Okay.
That they are in the process of evacuating 11,000 people, I think, if I have my numbers correctly.
I guess with all the other crazy shit going on, that one kind of got lost. But I have yet to hear any LGBT folks being blamed for blizzards in Canada yet. So there's that.
Well, I mean, blizzards in Canada is kind of like saying people breathe, though, right? Like, I mean, those are things that are just intrinsically connected, or no?
Well, we live just slightly outside the snow belt.
I gotcha. Okay. Of course, there's a thing called the snow belt. Of course there is.
Yes, there's the snow belt. Yes, but people don't realize where we live is actually more south than 7 border states.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Like all of Washington State is more north than we are, which I didn't think about that until I was talking to somebody from Seattle area one time, and I decided to look it up, and I was like, holy shit, I'm like quite a bit more south than you. Oh, shit. Man. But, what I was going to say that as far as the pronoun thing goes, too, totally honest, when I first started hearing about non-binary, it took me a while for the old brain to sort of jive that, because to me, you know, if you know you're a man or a woman and you know that's who you are, and that made sense to me, right? Because I always knew there was just a man or a woman. So that totally made sense to me, and sort of processing and figuring out how does one not be either. That took a while. Totally took a while. I totally didn't understand it for quite a while. I still probably don't really understand it, but I kind of have a grasp. But for me, like if a non-binary person was like, call me they, I would never sit there and go, well, I don't understand what non-binary is, so you're just going to have to pick one.
Yeah, that just makes conversation too hard. And because everything in life is about me, you're just going to have to change to suit me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to.
Yep.
If this old dog can learn new tricks, so can you all. You know, it just,
absolutely.
I mean, I'm still learning. As I said, I've been in the community for years, but my exposure to those that are transgender has been, especially since I've lived in PA, has been limited. And it was funny. One of my I guess was going through my friends list, and I never really noticed this, but she's like, you have an awful lot of transgendered friends. And I'm like, I do. I went through my list, and it's like, I've noticed, I'm like, I'm picking up more transgendered friends than I am, quote, cis friends. And it's like, but I don't.
Better.
Well, and that's the thing, and I think where people like Callie and Riss and you, Sam, I think have helped, for lack of a better word, is that I don't think of you guys as being transgender. You are Callie. You are Sam. I don't.
My gender is Sam. Yes.
Yeah, I don't. I guess in some ways my brain's been able to process that, but there's, I'm still struggling, and I will readily admit that I do struggle with the pronouns. And, it's like more so in the last 2 years because I just struggle with words, period. But it's really kind of a learning experience. It's a good learning experience. And I think where Callie, where your show and you're coming on our show, and Riss and Sam, I think that exposure, so to speak, is a good thing, and that's why I think your project as a whole is a good thing, because borrow Mark Nebo's statement, normalize atheism, normalize being transgender.
Trans. Absolutely.
I know it's kind of a cop-out statement, and I don't mean it that way, but I think the more that we can, people can put, hey, that's fine, or that's normal, the better.
Yeah, I agree. And that's and that's why we do what we do. That's why I try really hard not to have the same guests that other shows have on, because I just one of the things that I told the college class that I talked to recently is that, if you want to make an honest effort to learn and understand, like that has to come with listening to the experiences of lots of different people. Like, I am one person speaking from one perspective, speaking from one set of experiences, and by all means listen, and I'll answer all the questions that you have. But you can't get the idea that, like, okay, I've met my trans and I've listened to my trans and I can move on to the next thing, like.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
So I feel like the more folks that we have doing this kind of thing, the better, because it's awesome that as barriers go, the entry to podcasting and YouTubing is relatively low. And that's not to say that, we had that conversation earlier where, even like $50 for a USB microphone is a lot of money, but 10 years ago, if you wanted to do what we do, you'd have to convince a radio station that it was worth doing and sell advertising. And the barrier was just miles and miles and miles high. There was just no way to ever do it, But one of the great things about podcasting as a medium is that so many of the gatekeepers are gone. And
Yes.
you know, if you've got a laptop, you can scrounge up $50 for a USB microphone, and you've got some time to spend on YouTube learning to do stuff, you can put some stuff out there. And if it's stuff that's worth hearing, people will find it. So that's why I'm passionate about this in particular, because I just think podcasting in particular is a medium that's close to my heart, which is nuts for me to think, because I passively listened to a few podcasts 3 years ago, and now podcasting is literally my life. So that's a weird thing, but
Yes.
I mean, it's for that reason, you know. There's no way in hell I would have the platform that I do if it weren't for podcasting. I mean, that's 100% of the reason why I have whatever platform I do. It's why people know about me to invite me to conferences. It's why people know about me to reach out to me to ask questions when their kids come out or when their friends come out, that kind of stuff. You know, it's all thanks to podcasting. And I think, I really think podcasting can, and maybe even has, changed the world in a lot of ways. And the more people we have doing it, and the more diverse group of people we have doing it, I think the better off we all are.
Absolutely. And like you said about it changing the world, I've talked about this many times, how I became an atheist basically in a bubble where it wasn't a thing and nobody cared. And, you know, I went on to live my life for years without even giving it much thought. And when I started to, you know, I did some debating online a few years back, but, you know, that was, again, in another bubble of one group that no one else could see, and all of that. And it wasn't until I found out that there was a thing called a podcast, and I started listening to other people. And that's where I started meeting all of, you know, my friends out there from other countries, and, you know, as far away as the Middle East, and talking to people. And here I am. Never thought I would be doing this when I started listening, you know, and that was only 4 years ago that I started listening to podcasts. And that literally changed my world. And that, you know, it wasn't even as necessarily impactful from the atheist perspective, because, again, where I live, it's still a non-issue. I can only imagine how incredibly impactful it could be for a trans person who might be isolated and struggling to survive and have no support system, and things like that. So even just giving them the opportunity to tell their story, and then hopefully facilitating other communication for those people, like, the potential there is incredible.
I agree. Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add to that. That was well said.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I think it's interesting to add too, is that I look at the influence of the podcasting, specifically within the atheist community, is that blogging since about 2000, 2001. So I've been doing it 16, 17 years now. And it's like, I don't pay attention to my numbers in a sense. Oh, I have to get, you know, I don't really care who reads my blog and who doesn't. Get the numbers because I think it's kind of cool. And I've been noticing now that I'm back to doing it kind of regularly, although original content is still slow. The reach is, I have readers in Russia, readers in the Middle East, I have readers in Australia, and I know that half one doesn't really count. But thing opens that door even wider. And what it's done for the atheist community, I hope, and with, you know, Callie and Riss leading the way, so to speak, and for the transgender community. You know, I mean, when I have questions, I'm not a debate junkie like you are, Deb. Although I do get my say in, especially if it's on homosexuality in the Bible.
Yes, you do.
but and you know the conversation I'm going to refer to on transgender. For two people I am. I need resources on this. Marissa, I need. It's like, you know, and it's nice to have that resource.
Absolutely.
But you know, as you've said, Kelly, you know, in a sense, we are privileged. Even though I am poor as shit, I'm still privileged, and I know that. But it's nice to have that resource, and I'd like to see, you know, we have resources as, you know, being atheists, being able to reach out to other atheists, and I think, you know, but the lesbian gay community have resources to reach out to, and slowly but surely there are resources for the trans community, but it seems to be slower, so hopefully this will give a kickstart to that. And I couldn't think of the people I know. I mean, I know there's probably numerous other people out there that I'm not aware of. Callie probably knows more than her for sure, but it's nice to know the people that I do know, that I can rely on. Hey, I need help with this. You know, so it's a nice resource to have.
I gotta read. Lexa is in the comments there, and going back to LGBT superpowers. She says she's kind of hoping to go beyond the weather and such power level to powers over space and time, so I can skip the TARDIS if I like it.
That's legit.
Absolutely.
What's the TARDIS?
Stop it. Stop it.
Oh, I even know when I.
Is that a type of Gundam, or I don't know, have I built that one yet? Or
if it's not a Gundam, it doesn't exist, right?
You and me are
a Federation ship or a Gundam? I don't know it.
Them's fighting words.
We got Gundam, Dune, and Star Trek represented.
Yes.
It was that red box, right? Was it the one that Superman spins around in? And
all right, I had something come up. I gotta go. I gotta wash my hair or something.
Gotta wash your hair, right?
I'm feeling so.
Don't give her my address. Don't give her my.
I'm trying to get her to come up here too.
It would actually be pretty awesome if you could come. You should.
Yes, indeedy. We have to talk about that more.
Yes,
you're recovering more so. For sure. Goddamn bureaucracy is all I can say.
Yep, that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Well, we're a little earlier than usual. I don't know. Is there anything? Is there any other aspects of the initiative you want to go into, Callie? Or we usually go for about another 20 minutes or so.
No, I mean we're still figuring out the specifics. You know, all we've really figured out is what we've talked about thus far.
Right.
As far as like the actual specifics of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, that kind of stuff's still being worked out.
Okay.
You know, we just announced it kind of to gauge interest and just kind of, you know, make people aware that's a thing we're trying to do. Maybe try and get some people who are preliminarily interested. And that was a big, really important sounding word for me to say, preliminary.
Or even if people know people that could benefit from this or would be interested in getting involved, for sure.
Yeah, well, because I mean, even at this point,
what can we do? What can we do? What can our listeners do to?
Well, I think there's a very large group of people, I think, who have said to themselves at one point or another, like, oh, you know, I'd really love to do a podcast. I'd really love to do a YouTube channel. I don't really know anything about that. And then you just kind of move on. You never really hear anything else about it. Yeah. And I would say, you know, send those people to us, you know, because again, it might be, you know, people may have the means, but it's just an intimidating thing to get into. Like, I don't know about setting up an RSS feed and submitting to iTunes and that kind of stuff. And that's stuff that we've all done before. So like, we know how it works, you know? So that's, I mean, awareness is a big thing. And, you know, if you know somebody who has a voice and who has, you know, important things to say, you know, hey, have you ever thought about starting a podcast? You ever thought about starting a blog? You ever thought about starting a YouTube channel? You know, I know some folks who were doing this thing, and you know, we're not in a position to give anybody money now, but that's something hopefully we're going to do in the future. But at the very least now we can, you know, point people in the direction. We can give a lot of technical help. I mean, I have an audio engineering background. I used to run a recording studio. I'm making YouTube videos. I know a lot about how that kind of stuff works. So like, if nothing else, it's just a place to go where you know that like there are people who know what they're doing who are going to give you help and advice and you know, do what we can to push you along in whatever your journey is. So I think those are kind of the main points.
Well, I think too, and this is something both Dub and I stress a lot of times. Like, we would not be on the air if it was not for Cash and Dave Foda,
absolutely,
and Professor Steven, and both her and I. You know, we push people that if you got something to say, don't be afraid to say it. And being that most of my career has been blogging, I mean, I'm very big on blogging, even if it's just, you know, linking to I'm more of a news aggregator than I am a blogger right now, because writing is very difficult for me. And I will say this, people, if I can manage through a podcast with my speaking ability, I mean, the face for TV, and I sure as hell don't have the voice for radio. Although someone told me the other day that I do, but stumble through it with my speech problems. Anybody can do it. That's the joy of editing, even though we are live. I mean, yeah. I'm lucky to have Deb as my co-host, because 99% of the times when I start tripping over words, she will finish my sentence. I don't know how she does it, but she does. Which is kind of scary. It's very scary at times.
Maybe that's the cis white straight superpower. Maybe that's that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's a superpower I will take, because, you know, I do get stuck because I have the apraxia. But yeah, I mean, so we'll start sending people your ways.
Absolutely.
Your way.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Absolutely. I was going to say there was a question as to what is Gundam, but Alexa seems to have answered that rather well.
It's a type of TARDIS.
Yeah.
God, I'm so pissed at you right now.
Well, if it's any consolation, Callie, you can be pissed at me because I don't like Doctor Who at all.
Yeah, but you know what she's saying is bullshit, right?
Yes.
You don't have to like the things that I like to be on my
side.
F is for friendship. F is for friendship.
F is for something. I'm just kidding. I love you, Miss Awesome.
Hearts.
Yay! Oh shit! So have you got any travel? Well, you're doing PastaCon, you said.
Yeah, PastaCon is a thing. There's some stuff in the works for next year. I don't think any of it's really able to be announced yet, but
that's okay.
But yeah, I am not slowing down.
Yay! I know you're like, oh, I should really, you know, I'm gonna take some time to recover from surgery, and then it's like, gotta do a fundraiser, people.
Yeah, that
lasted all like what, 2 weeks?
Not even.
Yeah.
But very well done, by the way. But
yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah,
I did have to kind of chuckle because I'm like, yeah, rest up and heal. Yeah. Sure.
Moves her set up so she can sit on the couch and be more comfortable, so she can do 2 hours, or was it 4 hours?
4 hours.
4 hours.
4. Okay. I listened to 2 because I had to work that night, but yeah. I was like, yeah.
4 hours. But, you know, she was resting and healing.
Yeah.
Totally.
On the sofa. On the sofa.
Right.
Yeah. With a mic in her nose. Well, mouth.
I was going to say couch, and then I realized every time I say that, some American tells me I'm saying cooch, so.
Oh, fuck that shit. You're not saying cooch.
Yeah, well.
We pronounce it cooter up here. Thank you very much. Okay. Standards. We have standards.
Yahoo, VJJ, whatever the fuck you want to call it. It's not cooch. You have never said cooch in the 3.5 years I've known you.
Thank you. Some other people would disagree with you, but
fuck them.
I have to say though, this past weekend, I think it was about 6 or 7 times I was talking to someone and they're like, "You're from Canada, aren't you?" Really?
Let me guess, you said a boot. Or about.
Yep. Or one person I was talking to and I was just talking and all of a sudden they just started laughing and said, "You said a boot."
I bet that shit never gets old.
No, about as old as Mrs. Wright.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I never participate in those kinds of jokes, because I get it. Like, I feel you. And I'm usually the one that's like, gosh, I bet that joke gets funnier every time you hear it, doesn't it, huh?
Yes.
Like,
or it's like a few people will be like, "Oh, you're from Canada? Say a boot." And I'm like,
see, I'm kind of lucky.
How about I boot this up your ass?
Right. Yeah. Put a boot up your ass. Huh? Huh? Huh?
What'd you kick me in the ass for? Well, you asked for a boot, so, you know.
Yeah. Growing up, I always lived with Hambone because my last name is Hambridge. Well, now there's a Hambone production of podcasts. So I just, when they start doing the Hambone, I don't get it as much now, but I always think of the Hambone production because they've put out, I think there's one that I think my cousin does out of South Carolina or North Carolina. I never know which one they're in. But yeah, it's like, yeah, it's kind of shits.
I had to chuckle though. I was sitting at the after party. They eventually, the rooms that they had rented for the evening in this hotel, I think it was like 11 o'clock, they kicked us all out into the hotel's bar, which was actually a pretty comfortable space. And so everybody was sort of mingling around and chit-chatting. And I think the folks I had been sitting with all went outside to smoke, and I quit smoking. So I was sitting there looking at my phone, and a gentleman came and asked if he could sit. It was like a sofa, and he's like, "Oh, may I sit here?" I'm like, "Sure, fine." And he was probably about 10 years older than me. And I assumed he was there at the conference. So, you know, I was like, "Oh, hi, how's it going?" Whatever. And I after a minute or so, I kind of got the sense that he didn't really know what was going on. So I was like, "Oh, are you at the conference?" He's like, "Oh, no, I'm just passing through." And I'm wearing my my big American Atheist, Unabashed Atheist shirt. So it's like giant red shield with huge white lettering. And I was like, "Oh," so he's like, "Oh, conference, what conference?" I'm like, "Oh, well," and see, this is where my Canadian privilege comes in, because I will go up to random Americans and tell them I'm an atheist and I don't give a shit. So I'm like, "Yeah, it's an atheist conference." And he's like, "Really? So you don't believe in God?" I'm like, "That would be what an atheist is, yes." But it was kind of cool because, I mean, now granted, he had definitely had a bit to drink, but we had an interesting conversation. He was sort of a Christian, but I would say he probably leaned more in one of those, like, I believe in Jesus, but not religion kind of people. But interesting conversation. It was kind of cool. He actually was open to listening and asked like non-smart ass questions. So that was kind of nice.
That reminds me.
And then,
oh, sorry. I didn't. You go ahead, finish your story.
I was just gonna say, and then the Uber that I took home was nice, very nice lady, and she's like, "Oh, so you know, what are you doing here? You're from Canada?" And because of course you're from Canada, aren't you? I'm like, "Yes." And "Oh, it's a conference." "Oh, what kind of conference?" And I just kind of, I don't know why I said skeptic conference first. But she was like, "Oh, what does that mean?" I'm like, "Okay, fine. It's an atheist conference." And she's like, again, "Oh, so you don't believe in God?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Yeah, no, that's what it means." And yeah, and but again, she asked very thoughtful, "So what do you believe?" And like very thoughtful questions, and I was rather pleasantly surprised by that.
That's good stuff. That reminds me of a story. When I was playing in bands, we played a show in Cleveland, and we got there like super early in the morning, and we had a lot of trouble finding a hotel. And I mean, we went probably 7 or 8 different hotels, and they were all booked.
Ugh.
And so eventually we get like 45 minutes outside the city, and we find a hotel. And it was literally just because somebody had, it was a cancellation. And so she was, and we were like, what the fuck is going on in this city? Like, because it wasn't just like, oh, we went to 1 or 2 places and they were booked. I mean, fucking everywhere. And she goes, oh, the biggest Jehovah's Witness convention in the country is in town this weekend. I was like, motherfuck. Because I mean, we're like thrash metal band, like screaming heavy metal, like stuff. And we looked the part, like black hoodies, gym shorts, long hair, big beards, tattoos, piercings, the whole nine. And we get up in the is it a Days Inn, and we get up and we're eating the continental breakfast the next morning, and it's like all these people standing around in business clothes, and then us in our hoodies and gym shorts and tattoos and piercings and beards. And so we sat down, and I'm just like, I'd had like 3 hours of sleep, and I'm just sitting there eating cereal. This lady looks at me and she goes, so are you guys in a band?
And you're thinking, what was your first clue, lady?
It's like, yeah, we're in a band. And thankfully she just let it go. Oh, that's cool. Like she did, and I wasn't about to like, yeah, we're a metal band, and I'm also an atheist, and like I wasn't about to go all there, but oh god, it was so funny. I don't know if it's the most out of place I've ever been in my life, because I've been to Christian music festivals, but yeah, that was definitely a like, oh, a couple of these people aren't like the others.
Yeah. Well, did I ever tell you the story of when we were in Nashville at the first NanoCon, and you remember we all went to Hardee's for breakfast? Yeah. And so we had like 8 of us, I think, in a group. And remember, I had my Glory Hole shirt on?
Yes.
And so I go up, and I didn't realize at the time, but I guess Celeste's purse had like anime on it.
Yep.
And so I get up to the cash, and it was like your typical like barely 20 something lady taking the cash, and she looks at me and she's like, y'all have an anime convention? And I just looked at her, and I'm like, no, atheists. And she's like, oh. And I said, but it's okay, I'm Canadian. And she just like, would you like hash browns with that?
Oh, that's incredible.
I loved it. I'm standing there with the giant penis on my shirt,
Right.
And we went to the Opry. I don't think you didn't come with us to the Opry, did you?
I don't think so. I think we had to leave.
Yeah. Well, this was before the con started. You were probably setting up for your talk later.
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, but because we were up a bit early, so we drove around before it started, and we went to the Opry. We didn't go in, but we just took some pictures outside. So I'm walking around the grounds of the Grand Old Opry with a giant penis on my chest. It was awesome. We went in the gift shop, and you could hear the. It's like, hi, Canadian. Yep. We all wear penises. Come on.
It's okay, Canadian. It's good. I'm Canadian. It's fine.
Yeah. That actually kind of works, believe it or not.
I have no doubt.
Like I said, Canadian privilege, man. Go down south. But nowadays, everybody wants to know about my free healthcare. Like literally, everyone I talk to is like, "Yeah, you guys have free healthcare, don't you?"
Presumption.
Yeah. But
yet you have waiting lists of 3 to 6 years, and your healthcare sucks, and everybody comes down here for surgery, and
yeah, everybody's dying everywhere. Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, We're getting near the end of the evening here, so I think we'll start wrapping things up. So, Callie, why don't you tell us about all the 5 billion things that you do?
Well,
yeah, somebody that does more than you.
I know.
Obviously, the Atheists Manifesto. You can find it anywhere you find podcasts. We also have a Pathos blog. We are also a YouTube channel now. I'm doing YouTube videos, so that's a thing. I've got a couple of other projects. I had another podcast out for a minute, but I had to change the name, so I had to take everything down. I'm waiting to relaunch that. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. PastaCon is coming. If you can be there, you should, because it's going to be an awesome con with good folks there. It'll be a good time in Philadelphia. And
no shit shows.
Yeah, that's about what I got.
Awesome. Yay. And Beth, where can we find you?
Easiest way is on Twitter, Dune998. That connects to my blog, Havoc and Chaos, on blogger.com. And as I said, basically I aggregate the news right now and do some original content that I've been working on. And I also have YouTube under Beth A. Hambridge. I haven't put anything out in a while, still working on it. Research is such a bitch. And all that connects to my Facebook. If you send me a friend request, please note it's something with the show, or I will ignore you if we don't have any friends in common.
Awesome. And I will mention, I should have probably mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but especially I'm glad I jumped into everything with Rissy's weather being uncooperative. But Morgan was had no Wi-Fi this evening, and Tracy's under the weather. So I will say Morgan is over on the Bi Skeptical podcast, so you can find her with Trav Mamone. Her time is escaped me at the moment, but you can Google that, I'm sure. And she's at Mo String on Twitter. That's MO String. No String has probably gotten tired of getting her tweets because that's happened. Yeah, there was a couple that we were mutually tagged in, and I kind of like fixed them and retweeted them because I'm like, ooh, that's not Morgan. She spells it now. She's like, because my accent sucks. But and Tracy's over at the Godless Mama. She does her blog there, so you can find her material over there as well. And you can find me on Holy Crap, the Vlogcast, which is at 12:05 a.m. on Sunday mornings, hosted by the Shujin Tribble and the rest of our motley crew that tries to show up in the middle of the night and be coherent. So we try, or Joseph, who gets up at like 5 o'clock in the morning in Paris. I don't know how he does it or why, but he does, and we love him for it. And we talk about all kinds of secular things and whatever's on Shujin's mind that week. Last week they played Cards Against Humanity and I wasn't there. Bastards. I was like, oh great, play the game when I can't be there. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. It's all right. I said it was because they were afraid that I would kick all their asses, so that's why they didn't want me to play. That's fine. There'll be another time and I will get you all. Actually, we played our local group. We had an end of the world party when the world ended the other week, and we played a game of Cards Against Humanity, and Arno won.
Right on.
Just to let that sink in for a minute. By a landslide, no less. And we were playing with 8 people. When the man speaks, it's, yeah, doesn't say much, but when he does. Right. But anyway, and yeah, so that's holycrapthevlogcast.com. You can find him there. Find us all over there. So, and we will, of course, be back here next week, same time, same YouTube station, and Spreaker and all of that. So I think that about does it. We're a couple minutes early, but that's okay. I only got home at 2 o'clock this morning, so I've had some sleep, but still a little rough around the edges. So we'll call it a night. And Sam, you don't have anything to plug, do you?
No, not yet, but I'm getting there. So.
I wasn't ignoring her.
Okay.
I already knew she didn't really have anything to plug, but that's okay. You can say goodnight, though.
Night.
All right, folks, we'll see everybody back here next week, and we'll leave you with the Human Creed for Mankind. Good night.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.